I'm delighted to be here. This absolutely proves the rule that there is never a good time to take leave from the BBC at the moment. Whenever you go on holiday, something extraordinary is happening in America, and there is just no quiet period with this president, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go on. Colin talked a little bit about the title of the book and kind of why I was covering the terrible events in Orlando, whenever it was, when there was that shooting at the Pulse nightclub, a gay nightclub, kind of man with essentially Islamist intentions, bad intentions, went in and killed all those people. And the next day, I was doing endless lives for BBC News. The presenters in London would keep saying to me the same question. So surely this is going to result in a change in the gun laws. I thought, no, not a chance. Not a cat's chance in hell are they going to change the gun laws here. You know, if they didn't do it after Sandy Hook, if they didn't do it after whatever, you know, you can name any Columbine, you can name any number. They're not going to change it now. And I was talking to the bureau chief and I was saying, it's so frustrating that, you know, I think a lot of our colleagues in London just don't get. He said, yeah, if only they didn't speak English, we would treat it as a foreign country. And I thought, there's the book title. And so, because I think it's true that I guess like an awful lot of us, people in this room, like me, I grew up reading American literature, listening to American music. Did I like West Coast or East Coast more? Wearing the clothes, eating the food, seeing the films. You know, the first time I went to New York, I kind of felt I already knew the city inside out. I'd seen it in so many movies. And yet, in so many ways, America is such a totally foreign country. And what I try to do in the book is take you through different areas. So there is a chapter inevitably on guns and, you know, just how kind of alien that, you know, if you've grown up in Britain where you don't routinely over a weekend brush past somebody who's got a revolver strapped to their thigh, which is what you do, you know, just across the border in Washington, in Virginia, there's an open carry policy and people openly carry, you know, have I got my wallet? Have I got my car keys? Have I got my gun? Oh yeah, I'm ready to go out the house now. And this is in wealthy, kind of well-to-do areas. It's just part of... I was sent down to cover the floods in Texas, the terrible, terrible floods in Houston. And I was getting a flight to Austin, and I was at Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C., and going through security, and the guy in front of me, he's not let through. And I think, I bet you he's put a bottle of water in his bag, and it's above, you know, 100 mils, and that's got to come out. So I said to the security guy, the TSA guy, I said, excuse me, you know, I'm quite tight for this flight. Is there any chance you could let me on the plane? And there was a very kind of passive-aggressive, no, sir, that's not going to happen. And I thought, oh. And then a policeman came over. And they opened his bag, they looked at the screen of what the X-ray had found, and they pulled out a magazine of ammunition out of his bag. Now, I would have passed out with shock and having a minor heart attack if that had happened to me. And this guy goes, oh, I thought I'd fired off that magazine. You can't remember what bullets you fired or not. I mean, that is how commonplace it is to have a weapon. And the police said, yeah, stupid, look, that needs to go, you know, if you're going to take the ammunition, it needs to go, you can't take it as hand luggage, but otherwise be on your way. I'm thinking, this is all so foreign to me. And, you know, and you look at some of the reaction that there has been. I mean, so you know, I mean, it's a fantastic job being the BBC's North America editor. I absolutely love it. I love America, and in a lot of ways, this book is a love story to America, but recognising that there are things that are not quite, you know, there are oddities about the country that are worth pointing out, and guns is certainly one of those areas. But, you know, so you go down and cover. So the hideous side of the job is you will cover a number of gun massacres, and they are regular, and they are horrible, and you go to places and you talk to people who've had their lives turned upside down because some person with a huge amount of easily available weaponry has decided to let loose. And so I was sent down to Las Vegas, you know, and there were 60 killed and I think 560 Americans injured. And the president, Donald Trump, went down and said, well, you know, there's nothing we can do about guns. It's, you know, there's nothing to say on this. Yet when 8 people died in New York, but it was an Islamist-inspired event and there were maybe 30 people injured, he said, well, obviously we've got to have extreme vetting, we've got to have this. And you realise that different murders are treated differently in America. I thought I'd read a little bit, if you can tolerate that, to give you a bit of an introduction of the flavour of the book, and we'll talk about some of the broader themes afterwards. So I'm going to start where else, near the beginning, and talk a bit about the election, and because I think it will take me into some of the other things I want to say. And it talks about, the first chapter is called Anger. The divisions were between black and white, young and old, rich and poor, urban and rural, educated and uneducated. In short, those who were doing well and that vast swathe of America who felt left behind. And it was this latter group whose fury and rage Donald Trump tapped into. They were angry. Angry about wages, angry about job insecurity, angry about their savings, angry about college fees, angry about their loans, angry about their healthcare, angry there were plots to take away their guns, angry about their kids' futures, angry about illegal immigrants, angry about the value of their homes, angry with politics, angry with politicians, angry with Obama, angry with Congress, angry with Wall Street, angry about America's place in the world, angry about the rest of the world, angry about the treatment of military veterans, angry the country was going to hell in a handcart, angry about just about everything and anything. At times that it seemed that it wasn't so much that about blue collar or white collar, Americans were just hot under the collar. When you asked anyone what they thought about the state of the country, it seemed that every reply commenced with, "Don't get me started." And in perfect harmony with the national mood, America went through the nastiest, most mean-spirited, poison-drenched, hate-filled, vituperative election with a result as remarkable as any in the country's 240-year history. An election that pitched a pompous, braggadocious, thin-skinned, sexually boasting property billionaire and reality TV host who was big on gut instinct but knew precious little about the detail of any policy, against the political insider of 30-plus years who knew Washington inside out, had the detail of everything at her fingertips, never more comfortable than when surrounded by nerdy policy wonks, but had a singular lack of capacity to connect with the public or communicate clearly why she wanted to be president, other than it was her entitlement and her turn. The boor versus the bore. They were two candidates extraordinary in one other respect too. They were uniquely unpopular. Their disapproval ratings broke all records. In this country of 320 million talented, creative and brilliant people with rich reservoirs of experience to draw upon and varied backgrounds, America ended up with a choice of Trump versus Clinton. A decision of not who do I like the most, but who do I loathe the least. Well, that's a kind of flavour. I won't, spoiler alert, Donald Trump won the election. But the book's still worth reading. You know, it's hard for me to describe the chaos of the Trump White House. And I'm not making a political point, it's just the way it is. Working for Donald Trump must be a singularly challenging thing to do. I've reported on, you know, so when James Comey got fired, Sean Spicer was his press secretary. Sean Spicer hid in the bushes, in the grounds of the White House, so that he would not have to speak to the press. I am not giving you this as a metaphor. I am going to use the word literally, quite deliberately. He literally hid in the bushes of the grounds of the White House. That is not normal. It's just not normal political behaviour. There were other examples too, and then he gave a news conference talking about it was after that Trump had ordered the missile strike in response to the chemical weapons attack in Syria. And Sean Spicer started talking about why that raid had been ordered. And he delved into history, where he said, well, at least Adolf Hitler didn't use chemical weapons against his own people. Nearly right. Nearly right. There were those concentration camps, don't you remember? And so then someone asked him a question, saying, what are you talking about? And you could see his mind go into, he went into freefall, mental freefall. Words were coming out, they were not sentences. They were just random words. Now this again is not normal politics. You know, the White House agrees a position on what it's going to say about X, and Donald Trump tweets something totally different earlier that morning that undermines the White House's own message. And you're thinking, how can this go on like that? And it does. So on the one hand, and, you know, the appointment of Scaramucci, do you remember Scaramucci, who was the communications director for all of 10 days? A pint of milk would have still been drinkable at the end of 10 days, but he had come and he had gone. I mean, the sacking of this one, the defenestration of that, the jumbled... I mean, you know, there were kind of little ones that you wouldn't have noticed because they don't get on the news. Some of the differences that I noted in the book, and... You know, and there are things that are fantastic about America. I mean, I came back to our flat in London. And I flew back from Washington on Friday night, and then we arrived Saturday morning, and then Saturday night there was some snow. And woke up on Sunday morning, and the streets around the bit of London I live were absolutely covered in snow and ice. And so it was on Sunday night, and so it was on Monday morning. In Washington, I have a legal responsibility to clear the area of pavement outside my house. And if I have elderly or disabled neighbours, I am responsible for clearing their footpath. And the day that we had Snowmageddon in Washington, D.C. 2 years ago, and literally the snow was up to here, the evening news was not full of stories about elderly women breaking their hips and breaking their ankles because they fell on icy conditions. All the sidewalks were clear, because everyone had taken responsibility for it themselves and were not waiting for the council to come round and do it. Those are the things that I love about America, that there is a degree of self-reliance, that you're not waiting for the state. But equally, you know, I talk about in the book about the parable of the pavement and the street. And the pavement is all that's right about America, and the street is sort of what's wrong, you know, in that the state of infrastructure in America. I don't know how many of you have driven around America, or, you know, taken internal flights or travelled on Amtrak in America. I mean, it's falling to pieces. I was with one of the senior advisors to John Kerry, who was, you know, obviously Secretary of State under Obama. And he said they went to Haiti after the earthquake, and they were thinking, wow, these roads are pretty good. These roads are really, really not bad at all. And honestly, the state of American infrastructure, because no one obviously wants to pay any money on taxes, and again, that's a fundamental difference between our country and the US, that I think, broadly speaking, our mindset is, if there is a problem, we say, what's the government going to do about it? And in America, they say, what has it got to do with the government? And I think that that's a fundamental difference. I want to go back to Donald Trump. I've talked a bit about the chaos. I mean, there's a great story of when the Financial Times, I haven't got close to getting an interview with Donald Trump ever since he called me another beauty in a news conference. Things have been rocky. It's a challenging time, but the chaos. I mean, the Financial Times did get an interview. So Lionel Barber, the editor of the Financial Times, flew over from London because they were told they'd got an interview with Trump the next day. In midair, the White House ring up the Washington editor of the Financial Times, Dimitri, and say, "Why do you think you've got an interview?" "Well, because you rang me and told me you've got an interview." "No, there's no interview with the president." "Well, I've got my editor who's on a plane because you rang me and said there's an interview." "Oh, no, there's no interview." And so they stand outside the White House for 45 minutes in the rain, the editor, you know, at the gate on Pennsylvania Avenue. He's not allowed in because he's not been cleared by the Secret Service to go in, and no one goes in unless they've been cleared. So he gets soaked through to the skin. This is the editor of the Financial Times, and Dimitri, and the New York columnist, Gillian Tett. And then Lionel Barber says, "I've had enough of this. We're off. Forget it. This is the shambles." So they go away, and then someone from the White House rings up and says, "Please come back, please come back. We can get you in to see the Deputy National Security Advisor, a woman called Katie McFarland." And so they go back, and they go in and see Katie McFarland, who takes them into her office, which is overlooking what is called Pebble Beach, which is where we do our lives from. So if you see me on the 10 o'clock news, I'm on that area inside the White House grounds that overlooks the White House. And Katie McFarland talks to them a bit about national security, and then she goes to the window, draws the curtains and says, if I do this, I bet you one of the cable news channels will cut to me in the next few minutes. This is the Deputy National Security Advisor. And then they go on, and then they say, well, actually, Mike Pence will see you. Mike Pence is going to talk to you. So they get led to another room, and there's the Vice President, and he's ready to talk to them. And then they finally say, actually, do you know what? We are going to get you in to see Trump, but we don't know whether it will be on the record or off the record, and whether you're going to be in there for 10 seconds or, you know. So they go in there. Everybody, every senior official of the White House is there. I interviewed Obama in 2015, and there was myself, there was his press secretary, and there was a Secret Service minder. That was it. In the Trump White House, everyone is terrified of what Trump might say, so they are all there. So everyone is there in case he says something. And also, they want to be the last person to whisper in his ear, so that, you know. And so you've got a room full of the National Security Advisor, the Chief of Staff, the Press Secretary, the Communications Secretary, the Chief Strategist to the White House. You name them, they're all in the room. And so Trump is starting to be expansive now, and he's warming to his theme, and he's saying this is on the record. They have no idea whether they're meant to be asking about any particular topic or whether they can just free range and go anywhere, and they go free, you know, they just ask whatever they like. In the middle of this interview, 25 submariners who've been penciled in to see the president in uniform walk in as well. The Oval Office is now getting seriously crowded. So it's easy to have laughs at what is going on, and I've done my best to play for laughs as well this evening. But Trump is scoring victories at the same time. In the midst of all the noise and the chaos, Donald Trump is sort of getting done a lot of what he said he would get done. And a lot of people really like that, and that is why the support for Donald Trump is not hemorrhaging, and I don't believe it's going to hemorrhage anytime soon. There is an environment, I mean, when I said to the president at that news conference, when he said, where are you from? I said, you know, BBC News, and he goes, another beauty. And I said, well, actually, we're free, fair and impartial. Actually, when I said free, fair and impartial, I got inundated on Twitter. BBC free? I'm not going to pay my licence fee then. No, free from government interference is what I meant. But some in the media have decided that they want to be the opposition to Donald Trump. I think there is a bit of a culture that goes back to Watergate. You know, they want to be the they look at themselves in the mirror and, you know, who would play me in the movie of how I brought down the president? And I think that I think it's a really dangerous culture, because I think that, you know, when we do stuff and it looks like we're only out to get him, then the president is probably right to shout fake news. And this president is able to communicate directly with his electorate in a way that no other politician has as a result of social media, because of Facebook, because of Twitter. He can reach those places. And I would just say that, you know, the 2016 election saw a huge amount of totally fictitious fake news that was entirely invented, that was mendacious and misleading and designed to confuse. Some of it was designed undoubtedly to help Donald Trump. But I think that's a real threat to democracy. I think if we have people who don't know what is going on, then they're going to make really bad decisions. And I think that, you know, it's a very, very challenging. I met some of the young people from Wessex Scene earlier, wherever they are in the room. Hi. And we were talking about, you know, is it a very challenging time? Is it a difficult time to be a journalist? And I said it is simultaneously the most difficult time I have ever known to be a journalist, and also the most stimulating and important. I've never felt my job in the I mean, I've always kind of been vaguely proud of what I do and vaguely proud of some of the values that the BBC stands for. And although I think we are an imperfect organisation in so many ways, I still think it is vital that we give people information that is broadly fact-based, that is evidence-based, that is fair, and that is balanced, and that is impartial. And that, you know, we can't be soggy in our journalism with Donald Trump, because he's a very challenging figure. we have got to be robust. We've got to be tough. When lies are told, we've got to call out those lies. But equally, my job is to speak truth to power and to hold politicians to account, whether they are Democrat or Republican, whether they are Labour or Conservative, whether they're pro-Brexit or anti-Brexit. If we lose sight of that, then I really fear for our futures in a kind of vibrant liberal democracy, because I've yet to see a better way of organising our affairs than having free and fair elections where people decide on the basis of their views on being well informed what is the best way to have a government. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. I sounded like I was on a pulpit there, and I'm sorry. But I do feel it's very, very important at the moment, this challenging environment, and that you know, good journalism has never been more important.